Cool.
Started.
Yeah.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Altacast number 19, I think.
Oh, I don't know why I said 10. But that's what we're up to with gameplay.
I think it's 19, yeah.
Okay.
That's 19. Today's main topic, we're going to talk a bit about the latest major update involving climbing.
Yeah.
There's a lot to talk about for that topic, so we're going to try and get through this starting point fast. Joel's outside today.
I am.
Yep.
For this reason, this exact reason.
Yeah.
I'm in my brother's backyard, leeching off his Wi-Fi.
Yeah, let's get cracking. What's everybody doing, Joel?
So we've had some exciting developments. I have now started working on. Ooh, the leaf just fell. I have now started working on house building. I dropped my first spoiler for that in Support of Spoilers channel yesterday. So we're getting a bit of progress there. So house building is going to be the next sort of significant update.
Or like really?
Yeah, not next update, but like the next forest, if you will. In terms of what other people have been working on, I know Timo's been kind of fixing up various server-side maintenance stuff that we've needed to do, and it's just been building up. But I believe he soon will be trying to work with Victor to bring in some other optimizations that Victor and Serena have been researching and implementing. Then Tiana, Sebastian, they're doing cosmetics as per usual. Serena's intern, Ivy, she's been doing a little bit of both cosmetics and research R&D. And who's left? Boramy, what have you been working on?
So we just got off the back of the climbing tower. Last week, Joel and I were not around, so that's why we kind of missed an Altacast.
Yeah.
Joel's neighbors have been.
I don't know what's going on. A leaf just fell. I'm getting distracted by leaves.
So now, myself and Eric are moving on to working on the combat trial. Eric, I mean Saul. Sorry, Saul. And I've been starting to work on that. A lot of work's been done on that already. Now we're kind of going to be working on some of the maybe difficulty that are more that will be more enjoyable for people. You know, we kind of see there's a lot of new things that have been added to the game since we last looked at them. So maybe we can do some work to make them more interesting for everyone. And at the same time, I'm kind of working with Joel a bit on figuring out housing. Like we figured out most of it. Now we're kind of figuring out the things happening around it.
Yeah.
I think it's all we'll say for now until we have a proper housing Altacast. Not today's topic. Just making sure that that's
that's everyone. I mean, Tim is doing Timo stuff. Yeah. Cool. On to the major topic then, I guess.
Climbing. So, some people may have seen it coming. Some people probably did not. There were aspects of the forest update that kind of had climbing-ish features or mechanics to them. Initially, we were planning on releasing climbing with the forest update.
Yeah.
there were reasons why we didn't, because we wanted it to kind of have its own kind of time spent, given like being given a bit more attention than it would have, as opposed to kind of like this attachment to the forest.
Yeah.
And you can see with the scale of the tower feature, it makes a bit of sense. You know, it's kind of like this separate experience. It was not in the forest, away from it.
Yeah, there were a few clues going around the place if you kept an eye out for them. There were the things that there's some items you can only get in the forest by climbing. We took down the supporter climbing server, so there was a preview of climbing for supporters only for quite a while, and we'll replace that with a different preview at some stage. But we took that server down a couple weeks ago, or when the forest came out, rather. And
I pretty much lied to people about why it was taken down.
there were a couple of signs pointing towards it, but then the supporter spoilers we were giving were screenshots of the tower by the end of it. So people guessed it was some sort of challenge, but they didn't quite guess climbing. Anyway.
Well, yeah, climbing brings about a really interesting addition to the game for us. Something that we've always liked and we've always wanted more of are these locomotion methods, because it adds this new level of these new dimensions in which we can kind of build the world out in. So it's not just about walking places or dropping down places. Now there's this vertical element that we haven't been able to use before.
Yeah,
that's something that will be made more use of as the world grows, and will also kind of open up. And I guess the way we implemented climbing, you might see a similar style of implementation for other kind of locomotion mechanics. Something to note about climbing, right now, it's quite a nuanced mechanic. If you don't understand kind of like what it's asking of you, it can be really hard. But if you get it, you can be a really big expert at it. So right now we have this range of skill players with climbing. We want to help, before we make climbing any easier, because we kind of like the way it is at the moment, we want to make the process of you getting better at it to be easier for you. If the players have been struggling with it.
I think in general, there's kind of like this switch moment where suddenly things start making sense. And yeah, in the last update, we threw in those extra glyphs at the start to try and help players reach that switch moment. Like put your hands on top of things, pull directly down. And once you kind of get that jump and you're like, oh, goodness, well, that's what I was doing wrong this whole time, it can start to make a lot more sense. I think a lot of people have appreciated it, the fact that you have to master it to some extent before you can actually use it in the rest of the world. So there's this aspect of if you're seen climbing around town, people know that you've achieved that tower. Like people know that it's like a trophy for your success in that regard.
It's one of the most well-learned skills, I think, at the moment.
Yeah, and obviously it creates this interesting balance, because it means the game, as we develop out the game, we can't assume, especially early game, we can't assume that even necessarily anyone in your group, in your party, can climb. But over time, as you get later and later game, there might be aspects which really incentivize having someone in your party who can climb. to give you advantages in dungeons or to access bits of loot that you couldn't otherwise access. And I think it'll be interesting to see how people affect things like their loadout surrounding climbing as well. Because obviously as weight applies a little bit to it, or a lot to it rather, if you want to be someone who can climb trees and snipe people with a bow from up in the trees, you're going to need to have that light kit so that you're not having to dump your stuff to climb the tree. And I'm keen to see how people integrate climbing into the existing gameplay before we even get around to adding more sort of climbing specific mechanics into the game. Just stuff like I don't know, seeing if the way people loot the structures in the cave differently, for instance, if they can just walk up to it and launch their way up onto the platform or whatever. Like, it's going to be interesting to see how that changes the gameplay.
Yeah. There's an interesting balance alongside with it with enemies, because you can't fight them that easily. And also a lot of our enemies do have ranged attacks, so there's it's a nice way to be able to kind of like evade a bit better, but it has its own caveats. And I think as we grow out the amount of enemies and the challenges we have in the game, we will see things that climbing players will be able to deal with a bit better, as well as some enemies that maybe climbing players will have a completely different experience with as opposed to grounded players, like flying enemies, for example. One of the first discussions that Joel and I had about climbing in A Township Tale was that you had to climb this steep cliff to collect eggs or something from like a vulture nest, and as you're going and trying to swat out these carrions trying to get at you. And the stress of being in that situation, I think, could be a lot of fun.
Yes, the joys of stress. Yeah, for sure. Like, there's entirely new aspects to that. Like, because someone who's mid-climb, for instance, can't do archery whatsoever because archery requires two hands. But someone who's reached the end of a climb is suddenly in an advantageous position because they're up high, and that would be really good for archers. So there's this kind of there's so many different situations that climbing can put someone in, where you're extra vulnerable for a while, but you have the advantage if you take the risk. Or having loot on cliff sides, and then having times where you find yourself climbing downwards or times where you find yourself climbing upwards. Each has a different sort of vibe to it as well, because climbing up you can generally see better where you're going. Climbing down, like, I don't know, there's just, and when I say we, I mean Boramy, because I didn't really do the tower at all, but Boramy explored that a bit in the tower, where there's a little bit of a section where you have to climb down, and it's suddenly quite a different vibe going, oh, I haven't actually done this yet. Everything I've done up to this point is pretty much climbing upwards, and suddenly I'm climbing down this chain, and it's quite a different feeling.
Yeah.
Do we want to talk about other locomotions that might be coming in the future? Oh goodness, my laptop is hot.
That's mine's boiling up as well because it's like super hot here. We can talk about other locomotion options. There was one more point to do with climbing and level design that I want to mention before people get too worried. For the most part, climbing is going to be a semi-optional type of mechanic throughout the game world. There will be ways for you to access important key areas with climbing, but there will also be a path that maybe is a bit longer, maybe winds through different routes. That can be done without climbing. So we kind of want to leverage the possible challenges and obstacles of both for most areas, because we know that it's not something that everyone can do, and it's also not something that everyone is comfortable with on a accessibility level. As the game grows and as the VR industry kind of matures and the way players experience VR, maybe people will get more comfortable in the future. This type of level design will kind of already support the idea that, like, if every player climbs, it doesn't kind of screw up the game world because of these things. So that's the approach that we plan to take. Within dungeons and things like that, climbing, like, not every player will be required to climb to, like, scale a cliff. Maybe there'll be a way that you can get there without climbing, and maybe there'll be a way that if you have a player who can climb, he can go up there and unlock access for you. So we're going to be playing those two kind of methods to make interesting navigations.
And I think that's important from a team dynamic perspective anyway, because if the game requires everyone to be able to climb, then everyone will try to get the climbing ability. And then everyone climbs, and then no one is necessarily special. But by making sure that the game doesn't even need you to climb, it just gives you a bit of an advantage, or maybe someone in your party needs to climb. It encourages you to not stress about it, to just be like, okay, that's fine. Climbing isn't really my thing. I'm not going to be a climber. And what that means is by people accepting that climbing's not their thing, it actually makes climbing more special for the people who choose to be climbers. It's like it's like any mechanic to some extent. Like if everyone wants to be an archer, then any one person being an archer is less special. And obviously, just like we don't require archery, like if you needed to be an archer to progress in the mines because you needed to shoot a target or something to open the next layer, then everyone would be carrying around a bow with them, and it would be a similar situation. It would be less important, less interesting to be an archer. So the fact that if we required everyone to climb, it would just dilute the value for climbers, I think. The important thing is we want mechanics that increase diversity, not mechanics that try and force everyone to be the same sort of build or character.
And if climbing isn't free, then maybe one of the other locomotion systems that we might have may be the thing for you that you kind of enjoy or more comfortable with. So there's two that we think of most of the time when we kind of had this idea. One of them is swimming, and the other one is gliding. So literally the power of flying, power to navigate waters.
I wasn't sure where you were going with the second one. I was thinking a third one could be mounts.
Oh yeah, mounts.
Obviously, all four of these things: climbing, swimming, gliding, mounts. They could be things that just come as part of your default character, like you start the game and you can climb, or you start the game and you can swim. And we'll have to decide for each thing as we go whether it should be part of the core mechanics, whether it should be a trial-based thing similar to climbing, or whether there should be some other acquisition method. But in general, we're big fans of this acquisition method, this idea that you've learnt this skill. But all of these different locomotion methods, they have benefits and downsides. They potentially unlock new areas for you. It's quite an exciting concept. I think each of these will come with a complete overhaul in the way that you view the world. Like climbing, suddenly a wall is not a wall anymore. A wall is a surface for you to climb up. And if we put in a glider is suddenly a way of saying this cliff is not just a cliff. This cliff is a perfect point to launch yourself off to reach that other location. And we put in swimming, and suddenly, a lake's not just a lake. It's a whole world down there. Literally, I mean, anyone that's gone snorkeling or scuba diving will know that the way that you see the water just completely will change. I've never gone scuba diving. I've only gone snorkeling, so I'm on the shallow end of things. But still, like
that's pretty deep one with a snorkel. If you
yeah, I'm terrified of sharks, so there were limits. But I think Township Tale will have aspects of that, and again, these things will likely be quite optional. Quite have their own niche and advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah.
And on not only is there a spectrum of, I guess, accessibility or nausea to accessibility, which everyone lies on, there's other spectrums that we want to kind of target players on. So stuff like I guess risk reward is a big one. Like obviously climbing is a risky endeavor. And swimming, I imagine, will be quite a risky endeavor too. I'm not sure whether riding a mount will necessarily be the same level of risky.
Yeah. I mean,
but
climbing mount will require you to have room for the mount to move. I think is going to be a big part of it.
Yeah.
So a lot of kind of maneuvering that you do as an individual player, kind of like squiggling through like the undefined bushes of the forest, for example, you might not be able to do with a mount. You might have to kind of stay more of the set paths.
And so resource cost, I guess, is one of those things as well, where climbing and swimming might not require resources, whereas mounts and gliding are kind of more, you need an instrument to carry them out.
They're just going to
and then, sorry?
They're just going to teach us to glide.
Yeah. But I think the major spectrum that comes to mind is like the horror spectrum. Comes to mind when I think of swimming, where the experience, you might choose to swim, but you'll still have a wide choice in what sort of swimming experience you want. Whether you want to like, dip down in the rock pools to collect clams, that's one thing. And I'm sure everyone who's comfortable swimming will feel comfortable doing that. But then I think we will definitely explore the Dark Subnautica. I don't know, I've never played Subnautica, but the dark, cavernous, watery vibes where
it's pitch black like the caves.
You've got some sort of flare, you can't see anything, there's creatures around, you're just
you can't move as fast as you do in on the ground. You're out of your element here in this three-dimensional space.
And people, on that note, people have asked us like, what's our thoughts on horror? Not horror necessarily, but kind of scariness.
Like scariness, a bit of fear, like darker themes.
I think Township Tale is a very dynamic, or not like a very sort of wide world. It's a world where it's got that happy, airy, fairy vibe to it, but it's also got its dark areas. And there will be overlap, but for the most part, I feel like in general, you'll kind of know what you're in for when you engage with these things. And I think that helps make the game nice for everyone, because people can kind of go, okay, that looks beyond my comfort zone. I'm gonna skip out on that sort of aspect of the game. And either leave that for someone else to cover, or maybe if it's really intense, maybe it's just a non-essential part of the game.
Or maybe you have a way to equip yourself with your party and with your tools to kind of
de-intensify
the experience. So if you're kind of swimming through these dark caves and you're afraid of the claustrophobia of not knowing where to go next, maybe you have someone who's more comfortable with it and then go through first, and maybe leave breadcrumbs for you to follow on your way down. And
soggy breadcrumbs. in general, like as you can tell, in general, this whole realm of accessibility is kind of important in a world like Township Tale, where we want to build up the idea of building your character, building your identity, you know, having differences in your party, so not everyone's the same, and building up a world that faces you with unique challenges, both from an equipment perspective, but also from a personal skill and comfort perspective, will hopefully accentuate those goals. Like a really basic example in the game already is if someone's scared of the dark, they're probably going to opt to be an overworld-ish profession like blacksmithing or woodcutting rather than to be a miner. And it's just a really simple example, but yeah, more and more of those sorts of vibes over time, I think will be really, really nice to see.
Yeah. On the far as the implementation side for those, we do like the idea of the acquisition trials. A big part of it is because we end up with this pretty closed environment where we can teach you how it works before you ever encounter it.
Yeah.
So as opposed to us just giving you climbing and then, you know, you're kind of clumsily, I guess, trying to climb the world, and you'll die a bunch because you were trying to do something and you didn't understand what went wrong. Here you have this kind of safe haven, the tower, and particularly with the, we call it spirit mode, when you interact with that first orb that gives you the climbing power and kind of keeps your inventory safe on your person. When you're at this stage, you can fall as much, you can, you know, kind of jump around in this starting area as much as you want, learn how to climb.
Yeah.
Through each checkpoint, you can like learn the nuances of what's just changed about you. And we quite like that format for learning something as important as locomotion system.
Yeah. It also lets us kind of force people into a bit more of a difficult situation. Like some of those jumps, I don't think I would ever have had the confidence to do if I wasn't kind of forced into it. But especially at the risk, especially with the odds that the tower sort of presents to you. But because you know it is safe at the end of the day, like you might get kicked back a fair bit, but you're not going to lose all your stuff. It really, I don't know, it means that hopefully, I hope people feel like they get more out of climbing than they would otherwise. Because now they know just how high they can launch themselves or how far they can launch themselves. How long approximately they can climb a wall before they run out of stamina. Like they're well educated in that. And when you're in the forest and you see something and you want to climb it, you'll kind of be able to map it out in your head a little bit better, because you've got the experience behind it. And I think the same goes with swimming. Like if you see a deep lake and you see that there's like some sort of air pocket on the way down, you can be like, well, if I don't make it, I'm going to die, and then, you know, I'm going to lose all my stuff. But if you've done kind of the training for this, then suddenly you'll be in a position where you can look at things like that and you can be like, yes, I know I can make that one, but I'm going to have to be quick or whatever, swimming down there. Or, you know what, I need to pack on weight so that I can jump in this lake and sink super quickly, so that I can then make it into this thing. Like those sorts of things I think will be quite interesting. And we've talked about, for gliding, we've talked about like air currents, and we've talked about weight with swimming, obviously. So there's all sorts of interesting things that we can help expose you to all in one environment.
Yeah. All right. I think that about covers what we wanted to talk about with climbing.
Do we want to talk about timeline, just so people are...
A timeline for locomotion stuff?
For just this topic, yeah.
Yeah, there's no set date for when the next Locomotion system's coming out.
Yeah.
It's something like with climbing we had done a bit of R&D before, so we knew exactly how far away it is. We haven't
Yeah.
started that for other systems yet. It's something that I think we do want to kind of experiment with a little bit. We need to right now we do have some pretty pressing things that we want to kind of be dedicating our efforts to, so it's probably not going to happen. Like it'll probably not going to happen this year. The prototyping stage. It'd be nice if it did, but I think because we're working on housing, that's where most of our efforts are going into. So, yeah, if you're a supporter, we're going to be more transparent about housing than we were with forests. Forest, it was kind of like this danger mystique that we wanted to keep. Housing doesn't really have that. It's kind of like it's just fun, kind of creative building.
Yeah.
Once
we start getting into like decorations and stuff, we might not show off all the decorations just so there's little bits of surprises in there. But in terms of the house building process, the gameplay behind it, like how you install beams into your house or whatever, those sorts of things, I think we'll try and be fairly open with. For anyone who's talked to me about house building, they know like I've been keen as beans since day one for house building and Township Tale. So I think even if we said that we weren't going to spoil anything, I don't think I'd be able to help myself. I'm super excited to start sharing house building stuff.
And a quick mention, because I know we're going to get asked this a bunch, housing will be plot-based. It won't be built anywhere. I've been asked that a lot.
A couple of hot questions on. I mean, we're pretty much on the Q&A stage now, aren't we?
Yeah. So let's take a quick break, and then
let's take a break. Yeah.
All right, and we are recording. Okay.
Oh.
Hello and welcome back to Altacast 19. Today we're doing the Q&A. So sending your questions. I'm going to be going through them now.
I was thinking if we just knock off a couple questions that when we know are going to pop up for house building. The first one, Boramy already mentioned before, is the house building system going to be built anywhere or plot-based? The answer is plot-based. We might have forms of structures in the future that can kind of be assembled in the wild, if you will. But the actual formal house building will be plot-based. And that allows us to add additional security aspects to it as well. Obviously, you don't want someone building something right in front of your house and you being unable to get rid of it. Whereas if things are plot-based, we can ensure that things are spaced out nicely. And second big question that I know has popped up a fair bit is it going to be instanced, as in you go through this portal and it takes you to your neighborhood, but there might be like 100 different neighborhoods through this one portal? The answer to that is no. All the plots are going to be in the Township Tale world as you know it. So as you're walking around, you might come across a plot, and that will be somewhere that someone can build a house. The next question from that is like, what happens on public servers when plots run out? That's something I think we'll talk about in a later Altacast, but the short of that one is there'll be mechanics to try and balance the usage of plots based on the number of players to some extent. Is there another big question that we want to?
Another big question is ownership of plots and houses. We're working towards a renting type of system where you kind of, I guess, initially pay for the plot and then you keep paying to maintain it. It might be as slow as like once a week. It takes money. You've got that whole period to make sure you've stocked up. And if you fail to pay your rent, your house goes on the market and other people can take it from you. And and then maybe, I guess, a bit of a barrier. Like maybe we can kind of figure out the value of your house based on what you've built in it, and that'll drive up the cost of taking it back.
Maybe there could be an auction mechanic. So if it goes up for sale, like people can bid how much they want for it or something like that.
Yeah.
Another question that pops up a lot is it going to be kind of preset houses or like a repair box where you chuck in the resources and a house appears? Or is it going to be more freeform where you get to place walls and stuff like that? It's definitely way more freeform. You'll be placing the pillars and the beams, and then you'll be putting walls in. I won't go into too much detail about that. Already in supporter spoilers, you can see some screenshots of some beams and some walls, not walls, sorry, beams and pillars and stuff being placed around to kind of lay out the overall architecture or shape of the house. And then what I'm currently working on is going more into putting in the walls and the floors and stuff like that. But yeah, so it's definitely freeform. It's not going to be it's not going to be like oh, I want house number 6, throw in these resources and voila, there it appears. Okay.
Have any questions that we wanted to answer? Now we're going on to the actual Q&A.
Yeah. Question 1, would you consider an online Altacon as a first test?
Yeah, I think we would consider an online Altacon. It's not like we need to have the right things that we want to show at an Altacon, I think is the main thing. Altacon, if people don't know, is kind of a term that's been thrown around for a conference that we might have, kind of like E3 or PAX or Gamescom. But that is, of course, like based around A Township Tale and what we do at Alta.
Yeah.
With the speed of do stuff and work on things and announce things, right now there isn't a huge amount of sense for an Altacon. What I suspect you might see more of before that is maybe something like kind of like a Nintendo Direct, where we have this kind of like nice video presentation to announce something major coming. That I think those are pretty fun because they don't really go wrong. And another thing why Altacon is a bit weird is because we meet a lot of players playing the game online in A Township Tale. So the experience of meeting us is not, maybe it's not crazy special, I guess, for some people.
Just thinking about it, like if there was an Altacon, it would be cool if there was, like, the thing generally when you think about a conference, you don't think about a single experience necessarily. You think about a bit of a branching experience where you can choose to interact with this or choose to go to this session or something. I'm not sure if things are generally different to that, but I would love to, if there's an Altacon, I would love to get some community members to do segments on like moderating a server or like doing like console commands or something like that. But
There's there is an aspect of those conferences that I think it's like Joel and I were talking a bit about this, about Joel? Yeah, I think about the state of like sports and VR and like what's the point?
Physicality of it. Yeah, that was me. That was yesterday.
That's what I meant a bit earlier. Because you don't like I think if you're an audience member at a panel, it's a bit of like you're sat in that seat because of and you had to attend in this time slot because of like real world constraints that I don't think should exist in a virtual world.
I mean, no, to clarify, shouldn't exist in a functional virtual world. Like video games, I think those sorts of things are good. Like obviously Township Tale, we have limited space because we're trying to replicate a real world experience. But if you're purely there for functionality, as in to watch a game or to
listen
to listen to a presentation, then being constrained by this is your seat doesn't really make sense anymore. Yeah.
Like I'm curious to like how we can design like the virtual world equivalent of like the audience panelist paradigm.
Yeah, because I know there's been a lot of like virtual conference work where you actually book your spot exactly as you would at PAX or whatever. Like you book your booth, and it's a bit of a funny concept just because it's clearly trying to relate to what we understand in this physical world, but it's not necessarily the ideal way of doing things. Anyway, sidetrack over. What is your favorite Shmichi?
I like the glowing one the best, I think.
All right. Yeah, it's caused us the most issues. Makes sense. Orange one was the first one, so it's deep in my heart. Are you guys planning on adding portals to different dimensions and they relate it to the Nether in Minecraft?
Kind of, maybe. You'll have to see. Like it's a big ask to make another dimension, so I can't really say yes. It's a cool idea, but there's a certain township way of executing it that I want to make sure we can do if we're doing it.
We've had discussions of not this sort of thing, but kind of similar-ish vibes. Yeah, it's not that it wouldn't fit into Township Tale. It's just a question of how much value it would provide for the amount of work, and the timeline for that sort of thing. Will there be a way to get black leather, and if so, when? When, Boramy, when?
Yes, there will be. When? I don't know. I can't give a straight answer on that one because it's a little bit on me to kind of work that through. A little bit of programming required, but it's yeah, you'll understand why when it comes out, why it takes a bit of time.
Sorry, I can't read my screen. When will climbing from the preview server be implemented? And when will we get new content for our preview server to test? Okay, well, climbing is implemented. Many people, maybe if you didn't do the climbing preview server or it was a while ago, you might not know that climbing changed. We kind of redid climbing. We had our testing and our feedback, and we took that and we worked on the version of climbing that we shipped. In terms of when the next thing will come out, I'm not 100% sure. It would be nice to get some aspect of house building into the preview branch potentially, but we don't have any specific plans as of yet. We kind of need to evaluate what and when is the correct time to put stuff in the preview branch.
There's a chance we might do something a bit temporary, like just making a random fun climbing level, just so that there's something there, and that'll have some of the leaderboard features that we had back in the preview branch, so that people can compete. Yeah. But otherwise, at the moment, there's like it's not something we typically schedule. Is what goes into the preview branch. It's more so it was something that needs a bit of work implementing into the world, but we have kind of mechanically functional at this current stage.
Yeah, the reality is we haven't really had something to put into that branch for quite a while. The tower work, for instance, was not done until like hours before we shipped it. We had so many issues with the tower, like with the build, with some of the optimizations that went into that update as well. So we haven't really been in a position where we have something that we can go, hey, let's put this in the to replace the climbing. So yeah, we'll see as we get there. Will there be better? Oh, when will there be? All these when questions. When will there be better moderation tools? Hit me up with what you need, but it's a slow process. Chances are this person who asked this has already told me what they need. But yeah, it's a gradual process. We do work on these things over time. Like we've fixed issues with our banning systems because that's been a point of pain. In the last update, we added some more, not moderation tools, but server owner commands so that they can tweak community storage, that sort of thing. But yeah, it's tricky because first and foremostly, our priority is to make sure that the game is continuing towards its final vision. And that includes moderation tools, but it also includes gameplay. And we're always tight pressed on hands on deck. So yeah. Will housing have weapon mounts, the lockbox, and an option to teleport to your house in place of the current teleport spot? All right, there's 3 questions. Will it have weapon mounts, i.e. ways to store your weapons? Yes, it will. Will it have a lockbox in it? Boramy, do you want to answer that? Do we have an answer to that?
It's quite likely. Yeah, we'll see.
Yep. And finally, will there be an option to teleport to your house? As in, if I drink a teleport potion, I want to go back to my house rather than to the respawn point.
Possibly. We'll there's a chance for that. There's also a chance it might not be. I kind of just like the idea of having different kind of centralized points where people return to, and that's kind of what you like see returning adventures rather than immediately kind of like I don't want to close the game experience to being like from my house to where I'm going. I'd rather kind of have like this tertiary location where we come back to, and then it just kind of the movement of players becomes a little less linear and a bit more of this roaming experience.
Yeah. How long does it take for a heartflower to spawn? They're distributed around the world with a global sort of spawn rate rather than localized necessarily.
It's approximately every
the reality is there's always heartflowers in the world somewhere. It's hard to say, like, I don't know the number off the top of my head. There is a number for how fast these things respawn, but it's a bit of a different concept. Like an ore node, which respawns in the exact same spot, I could tell you spawns in 10 to 20 minutes, for instance. I'm not positive that's the number, but that would make sense because you could mine it and wait 10 to 20 minutes, and then you would expect to see another ore node there. Whereas heartflowers, even though they have maths behind the scenes, the spawn rate is less of a tangible concept because you're not going to see it when it respawns. You're not going to be, you can't pick this one and then wait a set amount of time and expect a heartflower to be there. In your nearby area, a heartflower might not respawn for weeks and weeks and weeks, but it could have spawned practically instantly 10 Ks to your, well, not 10 Ks, but a few Ks behind you or something. Okay. When will different arrowheads be added?
We may end up adding the Kakarimata arrowheads relatively soon.
That'd be awesome.
beyond that, not pretty much once we kind of have once we start introducing more cultures, I guess, in the game. Like you do currently have crystal spikes. You have bone spikes, the metal spikes. You can use the kakarimat arrows. You can use the rusty arrows. There's a.
Are there flint arrowheads yet? When are we going to have? But we have been adding new ones. Just probably not the exact sort of vibe that this person's going for. Yeah. Updated roadmap when? I'm pretty sure we've kind of updated it a little bit, but yeah, I need to double check it. Wouldn't pets and pet cosmetics triple your income? Firstly, we're not going to sell pets if and when we have pets in the game. They're going to be something you acquire in the game. As to whether there's some sort of way that you can cosmetically modify your pet, I mean, that's still up in the air. And yeah, maybe it would increase our income. Who knows? But at this stage, our focus is definitely just focusing on the game. Like the store is important to keep the studio going. But I would say the main thing that holds us back to some extent is just the scale of the user base. So obviously there's going to be a balance between making sure that we're providing things that people want to spend money on, but also putting ourselves in a position where the community can grow so that there are more people seeing said things.
Having more people kind of playing the game and us kind of making money from like a larger population of players, it's a bit more ethical than us kind of
that too.
Us cramming like like $3,000 worth of like possible cosmetic merchandise every rotation to kind of like tap out everyone's debit cards.
Yeah.
So that means there may be like some kind of cosmetics for pets, but you will still have to get the pet yourself because that's an aspect of gameplay that we want to make.
Yeah, we always there's kind of three meetings that go on. There's the meeting of like what is gameplay, and when we have these meetings, we don't talk about the store. Every now and then it kind of pops up, an invisibility potion. Obviously, if it made you invisible forever, it would have an effect on the store potentially. So we need to keep things in mind, but generally we just focus on talking about gameplay, and then we have meetings about the store. What are good things that we can do to help encourage people to support, stuff like doing spoilers. And then every now and then we have a kind of more overarching meeting where we have to fine tune how things will interact. So we had big meetings when we started on cosmetics as to how cosmetics and armor would relate to each other in the future. And I imagine we might have a similar thing about pets, but for the most part, pets fall completely into that gameplay category. And in our day-to-day development, we have long-term plans for the store, but the short term we focus on the gameplay. As we've mentioned in the past, Timo and Tiana and Sebastian have been kind of prototyping a bit towards I can't remember how much detail we gave, but some sort of additional supporter perks in the cosmetic realm. But keeping gameplay and cosmetics kind of separate, we find is the most ethical and I don't know, kind of user-friendly way of doing things. Like, we're not big fans of pay to win, or I also, yeah, it can feel bad when you see like someone running around with an awesome dog and you're like, damn, that's an awesome dog, and you ask them how they got it, and instead of saying, they went into this cave and they slayed its parents and then raised it from a pup, they say to you, "Oh, it's $20 in the store." It's a little disheartening. So to us, it's really nice, the idea that pets are something you can acquire in game. Okay. More eyeballs when? I swear we keep getting asked this.
Yeah. More eyeballs when we we'll see when we get more eyeballs. Yeah.
Has A Township Tale exceeded your player base expectations? It's a bit of a funny question. We expect it to keep growing, and we expected it to keep growing. Like there's always a risk element in these things. Like obviously there's a parallel universe where Township Tale completely flopped, and we're all in different jobs right now. So in that sense, we're all really glad and happy that the user base exists and is growing and is as passionate as it is. But
I mean, there's an aspect to what we've achieved so far that we've kind of designed a lot of things for. So
yeah,
in a sense, the growth that we've experienced is, kind of like us doing something like, okay, is this going to keep working? Yes, it does. Okay, let's do this next thing. Does that keep working? And yes, and yes. So we're we're ecstatic that we've continued to grow out the community, and more and more people are playing the game. That being said, like the 2-week update we do, the cosmetic updates, the content videos that we make, the Altacast, they're all kind of designed to, I guess, build like this fun community ecosystem between us and you, and between the game, the videos, the spoilers, the discussions, the communities that get made. It's all kind of designed to grow us. So it's and a lot of thought and deliberation.
Both size-wise and kind of connectivity-wise is worth mentioning as well. Like there's a difference between having a huge community and having a community that's tight together, and both of those are kind of important to us, like growing the community, but also like bringing people together. Just on that note, like it's an interesting thing, because when we look at things, we go, okay, Township Tale will need to be approximately this big in the future for this to kind of make sense. And when we talk to investors, we say, Township Tale is going to be this big, so that to them it makes financial sense to invest. Like there's a level where we can't make a game for a tiny community. We have to make the game for the big community. We have to develop expecting it to succeed, because if we develop it for a small community, then we can't scale it up. We need to develop for that big community. So yeah, we're constantly happy and excited when we see growth, but yeah, we need to set our visions big. Otherwise things will fall apart. Yeah, it's a tough question. Extra private server controls such as spawn rates, cost of repairs. Cost of repairs we haven't done. Spawn rates, I believe you can change for some things.
I think you might have changed it. Otherwise, it might be something that gets tweaked.
When will ladles be able to deal damage, so that the chefs can, teach people a lesson when they try and steal the soup? I reckon it would be nice to put in a couple more cosmetic hit effects. Kind of ones that just let you, kind of like a high five, kind of let you but you're not, yeah.
You don't mean monetizable effects, you mean like vanity effects, almost kind of like just social effects, Imagine we need to fix the fist bump at some point.
Uploading, this person's basically talking about Steam Workshop style cosmetics.
not that likely to happen at the moment. It might be like there's like a far off vision idea of us kind of curating outfits that go on the store, kind of like Dota skins to some degree.
Oh no, there's ants in my muesli bar.
But it's a bit kind of, but we're quite a long way away from that. Making Township Tale stuff is quite technical. So it requires like a pretty professional level of artist skills to make them, which means that if we were to release it kind of early, before we have like a larger user base with varying skills, it'd just be this long period of us kind of rejecting a lot of ideas.
Yeah, I mean, a quick explanation to back that up is when you think about skins for most games, it's an entire skin. So you kind of need to test it out with itself and make sure, you know, things don't clip or things don't, like you're modeling for this Dota character, say, so you got to play it through its animations and make sure they all look good. But with Township Tale, it's a mix and match system. So when an artist works on a vest, they need to make sure that it follows a long list of constraints so that it will fit with all sorts of different combinations, which can be tough. And I would go out on a limb and say we still haven't explored. We're still only scratching the surface in terms of, like, it's not a slot-based system. We don't have a glove slot. Technically, we could put in little finger puppets as a cosmetic, and then fingerless gloves, and we have fingerless gloves, and you could wear them together, because technically every little like segment of your body is like in different layers, is all different slots. So one cosmetic will generally go across a dozen or so slots. Like, it's quite a overly complicated system, but it's designed to make it flexible. Next question I'll just answer real quick. The roadmap has medium and distant future. What is the month or year duration on those things? There's a plan. There is none. We put it in medium to far future because far future is kind of our way of saying we want it to happen, but it's unlikely to be something that we pull out as our next task. And medium future is kind of our way of saying it's going to happen in the future. We're not working on it now, but it's one of those things that we kind of want to get done sooner rather than later. Yeah. I'm not sure if there's a better way of explaining that, but yeah.
Okay, let's do one more question because I got to go soon.
Oh boy, there's actually a fair few questions, but that's cool. Obviously, link's going to be in the description, so next to Altacast. And if your questions, it's going to be the same link. If your question's already here, it'll be there, and you can get your friends to upvote it so it gets to the top. Otherwise, otherwise,
Altacast will try and go through more questions because we didn't go through as many today, but we're a bit more in depth.
Will there be a cheaper alternative to spikes for making paths in the caves? So I'm assuming what they're talking about is like breadcrumbing the way down in the caves. Like, is there going to be a cheaper way that they can do that?
I already consider stakes relatively cheap in the grand scheme of things. I think there'll be better ways to guide yourself that require a bit more effort, but I think like the crystal stakes, the stakes with the crystal spikes may be the bare minimum method of doing what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
If it doesn't more than that.
Yeah. Obviously, there's crystal arrows, which kind of work, sort of. Also, if you find people are stealing your crystal stakes, feel free to put them on the roof now. It is possible.
Yeah. We did talk a lot about kind of a mechanic of hammering in stakes so that they stay there more permanently and they can't be removed by hand. You'd have to use some kind of to pry them out. which not everybody will want to carry because of inventory and weight restrictions. So yeah, and on that note, there is also plans for climbing tools and stuff like that in the future as well, to kind of aid and provide safety measures for more dangerous climbs. So this is not the final version of climbing that you'll see.
Just slipping in some spoilers at the end there.
Yeah, so. I mean, I think people, we've talked a lot about like object climbing, and I think it's nice to say. But all right,
cool. Let's wrap it up there.
Thanks a lot for watching Altacast. Link is in the description below for the Q&A again, and we will see you next time.
Yep. See you.